Hello, everybody, and welcome to Know Your Shit podcast, where our knowledge and pride in what we do drives us to be excellent. My name is Josh Cadillac, and once again, you're stuck with me in the driver's seat for today's show, but it's okay. We got a great show for you because what we do on our show is we look to find ways to stop just chasing paychecks and how to start closing customers for life. And we do that by talking to some of the most successful people in industries across the board to see how they figured out how to be successful. We got a great show for you today because we have a great guest in Jaime Diglio. Jamie, did I say it right?
You did. You got it.
Hey, I get a cookie. I love it. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm impressed. You got it. It's dig in. Let's dig in. Diglio.
Well, I may be a little Italian, so that helps. To get
Right.
it right.
Well, apparently, no, they actually, I guess the real pronunciation is Diglio.
Yeah, it should be, but
right.
It's a thing. Yeah, totally a thing.
Right.
The original name of my people had a G in it that totally gets run over as well. Like they don't believe in executing G's. G's are just something to be skipped over.
Right. Oh, that's so
we
funny.
don't talk about the G. It's not a thing.
Shoot.
So, Jamie, what is it that you do?
So I'm a high performance coach. I specifically work with leaders and sales teams.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
What got you started doing that?
Well, I spent many years in corporate and in running sales teams. I was at Gartner and Microsoft, working with lots of big name companies you can think of, selling all day every day. And I found that I just found that there was a lot that we were leaving on the table in terms of helping people to get to peak performance. In many companies, it became very much about sort of a one-size-fits-all strategy for coaching and development. And when we do that, right, we treat everybody like a number, not a name. We tend to lose our competitive differentiator. And so I saw that over and over again, and I wanted to do something about it. So so here I am. I left corporate, started my own gig, and now that's what I do, right? I help people perform at peak levels.
I think that missing the fact that not everybody's brain damage coming in is the same is a big part of this. I mean, we all have our own baggage, our own crap that we have to work through, and sometimes. And I've found, and I don't know if this is true for you, but typically our biggest strengths and our biggest weaknesses are highly linked together. Mm-hmm. Right. And so figuring out how to lean into the strengths and kind of downplay the downside, the negative side of our, whether it be OCD or whatever it is that people tend to have, right, is kind of what we're looking to do.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's oftentimes I'll talk to a sales leader and be like, okay, what do you think your team needs? Like what's the gap? And the reality is most of the time they don't really know. And so oftentimes what happens is that they invest in some sort of training around prospecting or, large deal strategy or whatever, and then they don't get the results. And the reason they don't get the results is because they don't really identify what their people actually need. And so that's where I've sort of flipped that whole one size fits all training and coaching on its head. And the programs I run are called the Win Room programs, and they were named, how do we want to get in the win room? Everybody wants to get in the win room, but it was because everyone I took through it said it's exactly what I needed, right? So it was like a custom fit. My customers named it. It was like they were finally getting what they needed, meeting them where they are. And then once you tap into that, right, you understand people's strengths, their drivers, their motivations, their differentiator, right? Everything else becomes easier because they get to sort of see themselves in the most effective way and how to measure how they matter.
Sure. Do their insecurities play into that for you? Is that something that you assess, or is that something that's irrelevant?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is the piece around this is that everything that I'm doing is typically not measured. And it's sort of where they're, like you mentioned here, right? So it's within their headspace, their confidence, number one is their self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. So if we look at like the statistics around self-awareness, it's about 85%, maybe more, that believe that they're self-aware, but it's actually, the data tells us that it's about 15% that are actually self-aware. So People will say that self-awareness is like this squishy soft skill thing. I know, isn't that crazy? But what I tend to emphasize, because it's true, is that it's a competitive advantage,
Hmm.
right? Being self-aware is a competitive advantage.
So do you mean that when you say self-awareness, are you saying kind of like that ability to be introspective as self-awareness, or how do you mean it?
When I say self-awareness is having like knowing how you're showing up in every interaction,
Okay.
right? So
So
being like knowing your tendency. So my tendency is like I move really fast,
okay. Well, yeah.
right? That's where I get like we're talking to
Guilty is charged.
what?
Guilty is charged over here. Yeah.
But understanding where your strengths are and where that's coming from, but like knowing yourself, right? What drives you? So how are you identifying? I talk about it being like most people struggle and most people are not selling at their capability. They're not performing because they're stuck where I call in the war room, right? Um, a different definition than you might know. Um,
Yes, sir.
when I talk about it, like we talk about mindset, right? And how self awareness ties to that. But like we all have two rooms in our heads all the time. On one side's our what I call our war room. It's where we work against revenue or work
Mhm.
against results. It's where we doubt ourselves, self sabotage, right? We get in our own way. We focus on our weaknesses. People are very good. We're wired to be here.
Yep.
And so the goal with the win room, right, is how do you shift to be able to notice when you're there, when you catch yourself, right, with that self talk, whatever it is, right? How do you catch yourself and get over to what I call the other room in your head, which is our win room. It's where we
Mhm.
focus on what I need, what's important now, right? It's where we're clear on our goals, our values, the direction we're going in, all the things that we bring to the table,
Yeah.
right? How do we shift that? The quicker we can learn to shift it, the shit shift, if you want to call it, the more we're going to be on it, right? So the more we're in the win room, the more we're focused on our goals, the
Sure.
direction we're going in. But most people aren't even aware that they're stuck over here because they haven't built out. You go, and I'm sure because you talk to so many people all the time, right? It's like you'll talk to people and they'll say they're dissatisfied or they're just not performing to the level they want to be at, or they're not in the career, primarily the career space that they want to be in. And I'll say, okay, so awesome. So tell me, like, what would ideally, where would you want to be? What would success look like? And 99.99% of the time they say, I don't know.
Yep. They don't define the win before they go in.
Correct.
That's critical. I mean, there's two kind of components that I'm hearing in what you say, because it's always great when I get other coaches on, because we want to, I think, talk about the same things from different angles, which is great because different people need it from different angles.
Yeah.
And a little bit of what I hear you saying is, figuring out what makes the horse run in the first place. Like,
Mhm.
what will make me go? Do I know what makes me go?
Right.
Is it carrot? Is it stick? Should it be that much stick? Maybe
Right.
I'm getting a little fat because I'm eating too many carrots. I don't know. Right.
Right.
Figuring out what works, because that's one of the crazy things I found, especially with really successful people, is what they do is they lean into what has worked
Mhm.
and they just do more of that.
Right.
And so if that is being super self-critical, if that is running themselves down, that has historically made them chase harder.
Right.
They tend to lean into that, and at some point it exceeds its usefulness and it's no longer adding to their overall experience of life. So they're doing it and they're chasing and getting even that success,
Right.
but they're miserable in the process.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
I
yeah, that's kind of a piece of it, what I was going to say, but I want to
well,
hear your take on it.
I'm literally, that is why I do what I do, because I was a super successful sales leader, for over a decade, and then I burn out.
Yep.
And I was like everything, because I was in an environment which wasn't unique to my organization, but um, I was in an environment where I kept being told that I wasn't good enough,
Yep.
and that the things that made me unique and different, I was told to like make those, like I was taught to like ignore those and focus on everything I wasn't good at. And
Yeah.
so over time, it made me completely lose my foundation of who I was. And I actually did I did my TED talk on this a couple of years ago. But what happened to me, because we don't talk about this, is sort of when we shut down, right? However you want to talk about stress in the workplace, I mean, it does impact performance, how people are managing their stress. For me, what happened to me is like I used to cover all the hedge funds and private equity firms and all these, Wall Street. For me, it was like I was so stuck in my war room, I didn't even know it was there, and I my body shut down. I lost feeling in my lower half of my body, and that was my wake up call, which is why I do what I do today.
Love
Because
it.
yeah, I mean, it was, whoever knew that that would even, I mean, that could happen.
Yeah.
But it was all just part, it was a stress response in my body. But how do we get people to be more, how do we get people to be able to show up more consistently, like you said, like, and be, continue to grow and be successful, but also learn how to listen to themselves and right. And like, how do you take care of yourself? So that's a big part of that sort of like self-awareness. If you're not self-aware, you don't know that it's like you're operating like you're, sitting in a pot of boiling water.
Yeah.
You don't know,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Especially for us, like we're high performers, right? We want to do well. We've always been, we've been successful, but to what
Chase.
cost?
Right. We're chasing it. And the question is, are we chasing it well? And are we burning ourselves out and doing it? I mean, it's like just like taking and tuning a race car. You can
Yep.
only add so much power. You add one more horsepower, and now it breaks constantly.
Yep.
And so if we're going to take and if we want to add more power, we have to fundamentally rethink how we're tuning and building this engine.
Absolutely.
We can no longer just take and add power.
Right.
It doesn't do any good. Diminishing returns, right? And
Yeah.
so figuring out if there's a way to relook at this person and say fundamentally, let's tear this thing around. I mean,
Mm.
maybe the best example I could give is as a kid. My parents used to tell me how lazy I was as a kid. And they
Mm.
even had a lazy song for me and everything like that, which is fine because I'm not gonna lie, I was a lazy kid. Um, but I've been fighting that the whole time. Like when I see myself being lazy, I'm like, you're being lazy. Get
Yeah.
your ass in gear, go. That's not what you do, right? And kind of there was a point where I realized, you know what? I'm not that lazy guy anymore. Like I'm was afraid for a while to slow down because I was afraid of becoming that again.
Hmm.
And I'm not that anymore. That's not who I am anymore. So I can rest and not have to sweat
Right.
becoming that person anymore, and keeping that in balance and kind of not just being self-aware but being aware of the change and the progress that you've made,
Right.
and kind of playing into that. Now that I'm here, my concerns for myself don't need to be the same anymore. They need to take and grow with me a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, 1,000%. And if it's sort of this thinking that if people could see you the way that you see yourself a certain way, but if you could see the way other people see you, right? And like if you're talking negatively about yourself, and then comparative, it's like this is comparison is a huge part of this as well, right? Like
Sure.
social media, everybody's comparing against the highlight reel, not the real reel. But this right, so this comparison factor, and the idea is that we tend to, our brains are wired like we focus on everything we're not doing and we forget everything we are doing, right, already, because we're already
Yeah,
operating at a high, so we just keep
absolutely. We don't give ourselves credit.
no. So what we do in this is this system that I've developed where we're basically breaking the person down, to your point, in a good way, but we're helping use self data, right? So every piece of data about themselves, about their values, about their strengths, about how people see them, about their accomplishments, all the things, right, that we can show them who they are and how to build out their, like, what I call your unique leadership language. Everybody has their own leadership language because everybody's a leader and a follower depending on what you're doing, right? How are you leading yourself, right? But you need that evidence. So you're using the data around yourself to then use that, and like that becomes the way that you communicate on a consistent basis. So it's just like by showing someone like all of this, maybe thoughts that they've had, but by putting it into real words and data to show them like how they matter, how to measure how they matter, how do they show up, what's their differentiator. And then once we do that, the success is exponential because we've like tapped into their power setting.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think the fun thing would be to kind of ask you this question. What do you think in your assessment, self-awareness,
Yeah.
what in your makeup do you think makes you uniquely good at what you do?
Um, what makes me uniquely good about what I do is because I was the kid that was overweight, who didn't have a lot of friends, who was super shy, who wasn't athletic, right?
Yep.
Who had people tell me all along that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't smart enough. You know, it's like what is that? Is it the Stuart Smalley? It's like that Saturday Night
I'm
Live.
good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me.
Do you remember the one with Michael Jordan? Oh my God, it's so funny.
I don't, but I'm going to
Yeah,
totally Google it after we're
anyway,
done.
it's him doing it with him. Anyway, but I think uniquely for me was I look at myself as an underdog. So I wasn't good at, like I said, I wasn't really great in school. I wasn't good at sports, but then I found what I was good at within those things. So like for sports, I'm like the example of I found sports. I wasn't like naturally really good. I tried hard. I was very good at seeing the room, right? Like reading the team and being
Hmm.
a leader. And then I went from like not being good at sports to playing college soccer as a captain of my team. Like
Yeah.
I thrived. I went to college. I didn't have any sales background. I was interested in helping people, so I jumped into sales and became very successful there. So I'm like this person who I see it like nothing has really come super easy for me, and I've like really leaned into because I didn't know how to measure my value from a young age, right? And saw that I could push past people's um you know opinions, or what school says or whatever, and help people to see that they could move beyond maybe the stories they tell themselves or what other people have told them what their limitations are. So I'm
Yeah.
always looking for that, and that's so I think it obviously uniquely comes from because that's who I was. Like I had to push beyond the limitations that people saw for me.
Hmm.
And so I'm constantly trying to help people see their the value in themselves.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what makes you passionate about what you do?
Can you see my passion?
Just a little bit. Just I think there was a passion flash momentarily that.
Passion, yeah. I mean, I am because I see people who are just stuck and they're in a story that either they told themselves or somebody, you can say like told you 30 years ago that you couldn't be. And
Yep.
I'm like, no, that's not you are who you decide you're going to be. But you have to decide, right? And then it's about, pulling out and helping you to see the things that are uniquely like your strengths.
Hmm.
What everybody has strengths that's just usually covered under like 100 feet of shit, right, that
Yeah.
we think we're supposed to be because we're all trying to be this stereotypical whatever society thinks we're supposed to do. And that's why most people are miserable, because they're like comparing themselves to everybody else, running everybody else's playbook instead of their own playbook.
Absolutely. We're playing to somebody else's drummer.
Yeah,
We're trying to win somebody else's game rather than our own,
you
and
got it.
we haven't defined it. So let me ask you this: how do you? Because it's great to be highly successful. It's great to push hard, but I think that those of us that push so hard feel our failures, our letdowns, in maybe in a deeper way than a lot of other people tend to.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of pressure. How do you manage yourself and unmet expectations when maybe everything goes to crap, even though you did everything right?
uh it's funny. I was like writing a post about this morning. Is like you can do everything the right way, right? Like you can
Mhm.
do all the right things, and you still won't get the deal,
Yeah,
right? Or whatever. And it rarely has something to do with you, right?
absolutely.
There's all these different factors that you can't control. All you can control is what I call your real AI,
Hmm.
your aim and your intention, right? Your aim and your intention in everything that you do. So if your intention is good, right, you're aimed in the direction that you say that you're going to be, that you're focused on, you're consistent, the results will happen, right? Failure is just part of the process. right? It's the learning. It's like, how do you like lean into, and I know people are like, oh, oh yeah, you're learning. It's like, yeah, but I lost the thing or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but like, what did you, you didn't get it. So like, what did you learn from it? Like, what can you take from it? What nugget can you use? Right. And hopefully you don't like, however you respond to the failure, right, is that you're creating a way to continue to sort of build that reputation and that relationship with
Sure.
whoever, right? So maybe they don't buy from you today, or maybe it's later, or they refer you to somebody else.
Right. There you go. I mean, I always say, no matter how it goes, I want to always go out like a gentleman, so
Right.
they can always say, hey, look, that Josh didn't work out for. I got to tell you, he's a good guy. Like,
Right.
and I think that getting some ROI on everything is huge. Look,
Right.
if it's a loss, it could be either a total loss, or I could try to take and get something out of it, so I can at least redeem something from
Right.
this. And if it's a nugget, if it's an idea or something, this will be hugely helpful.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree. So let me ask you this: is there a tool that you would suggest to help our listeners?
Um, so I definitely always recommend to do a any sort of behavioral assessment that you
Hmm.
can get your hands on. I teach a few different ones to in my program, but there's different behavior. Like people have heard of DISC. I personally am a big fan of predictive index, um, and actually there's different, and there's also all these tools out there where you can that actually it's scary, but they can pull your profile
Mm,
just based off of, and this is a lot of what I teach sellers in how to decode your buyer and what are the things that you should be, if you've heard of love language,
hmm
right? So it's kind of like love language, but I talk about it as like the new ROI, which is your return on interactions.
hmm
So to your point, how are you making money versus losing money in every conversation?
Sure.
So it's how are you, creating conversations where you're hitting the mark more effectively and speaking. Um, what I call is, are you familiar with the platinum rule?
I think so, but
Golden
refresh my.
rule. Golden rule. Like we learned
Yeah, right, right.
golden rule is treat others as you'd like to be treated.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I really focus on the platinum rule, which is treat others how they want to be treated.
Right.
And
Okay, yeah, I
so,
definitely have heard of that. Yes, okay.
yeah, yeah, I know. Well,
I knew that I knew it, but yes,
like my kids come home from school and they're like, "Do you know this?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "How can you not know this?" I'm like, "Because I learned it like 40 years ago." I don't know, you
yeah.
know.
It
It's
was
like,
important then. I've totally put that. It's totally in the pile of irrelevance right now. Let me pull it
yeah,
back out.
absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, so when we think about how do we show up and so that we speak how the other person wants to listen,
Yeah.
right? So this is really about taking it to your point around like when you have a loss or whatever, you look at it instead of looking at it as one dimensional, we're really looking at it as four dimensional because it's not necessarily about it's the interaction, right? How are you that compounded interest of all the interactions, and then how you're thinking about then that person is going to that how does that build on your reputation? How does that then make the next person say, hey, Josh is a really good person to work with, right? And so like thinking about it that way, about how you're consistent and not a one and done. And that's what so many sellers, they just look at it so transactionally.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, you guys, you're losing. You've already put through the effort to build the relationship and then you shut it down. You leave so
Yeah.
much money on
Brutal.
the table.
It's
It's
it's miserable. It's
it's
nuts.
it's crazy to me. And I'm like, so you're like, it's like changing the way you think around about how deals are made, how relationships. So that's the ROI, right? The
Yeah.
return on the interaction, how you're thinking about how to understand and read like the person's listening.
Yep.
So, I'm sure you know this, but it's like, we're having three different sales conversations right now. Like I'm having three, right? The one in my head.
Hmm.
The second is what I'm actually saying
And then it's what I'm actually hearing.
and what you're hearing. And you're hearing, if there was somebody else in the room, they're hearing something different. So as a someone who really, like really the real competitive advantage is how do you listen for a person's listening,
Sure.
right? And
And I think that idea of anticipating the customer is a big one that I've been talking about.
right,
Like figuring out what bell curve statistical analysis, like what's this customer going to be like before I meet them. The
Right.
second I make contact with them, I got to adjust that bell curve to what they actually are, right? And then as I'm talking to them and the feedback that I'm getting, I'm constantly adjusting that bell curve to try to have the greatest likelihood of who this person is and what they're hearing from me
Right.
in there. And so I always say that, and this is my take on it, that I'm trying to tailor a suit to the
Yes.
person that I'm meeting, right? And so I don't have their exact measurements. But
Right.
what I can do is I can start sewing some pants and I can start sewing a jacket before anything. I know I'm going to need cuffs. I'm going to need collars. I'm going to need a bunch of stuff. I can start sewing that. And then as I see their feedback to what I'm saying, I
Right.
can now take and start getting that inseam where it needs to be. I can get the pants length where it needs to be.
Right.
Um, and but it's going to be based upon the feedback I get from them and not just verbal feedback, the whole
Right.
thing, body language, the whole deal.
Absolutely. And so this is coming back to where we're talking about the self awareness part.
Mhm.
So most want to just jump to the, how do I read the buyer, whatever, right? And what I say and what I do is we first start with the self because you have to know yourself. The more you know yourself and you're grounded in who you are, the more confident and clear you show up. Your energy, right? Like you always say is like your energy, tells a story before you say a word.
Absolutely.
How you're showing up really comes from that sort of embodying who you are. Because even if you try to tailor it, but you're not grounded in who you are, is that it's going to come across like sometimes fake, right? Like a
Always.
covering. And so we don't want to do that because when we do that, people don't trust us as fast. And so there's
Absolutely.
a breakage of trust. So that's where the self awareness part, measuring that part is so important, and helping to really be grounded in who you are and also just that the confidence in who you are beyond what you're selling. It's just as a human, like, is this somebody that's going to want to have another conversation with me? And so breaking through that sort of, like the sort of that facade that oftentimes sellers and people have when they show up. I mean, they're just so I say, we want you to be less predictable, more memorable, right?
Mm,
It's about being memorable. And so teaching people to use their own language, which is rooted from who they are, their values, their strengths. When you communicate with that, it's exponential in terms of the way the person feels and feels connected in the conversation. So
absolutely.
it's measuring that part that very few measure, is the key that we see with the results with all of our programs of how we exponential, like the growth and the productivity, the executive presence, the increases
And
because of.
so, yeah, no, and I mean, this is all absolutely amazing stuff. I mean, I love hearing this because it's it's so much of what I've learned the hard way in being in sales, and so much of what we teach. And so, I know you have a book out, and I'm assuming the book is talking about all of this.
Yes, the book is called Moneyball Leadership.
Okay.
You're familiar if you're a baseball fan.
Absolutely. As it turns out, I might slightly be a very sad baseball fan who lost a World Series recently. I don't want to talk about it.
Wait, are you from New York originally?
Yes.
You are. Oh, okay. Where?
Red Hook, Brooklyn is where my people are from. I
Oh,
mean,
okay. Okay.
yeah, but yeah, my father had box seats at Yankee Stadium
Oh,
forever.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
Um, that's so funny. So my husband is a New Yorker. So we're a divided household. I'm from Boston originally. I know you probably, if you'd known that, maybe you wouldn't have wanted to talk to me.
I'm equal opportunity. I'm willing to let you get past your previous poorly conceived notions.
I've learned right back to your question about too, like what makes me, good at what I do is I have learned how to see both sides
Mm-hmm.
and
You got
everything.
it.
Right? So both sides. So anyway, so I'm, yes, but my kids are Yankee fans. So again, I live in a divided household. But yeah, so Moneyball Leadership, the forward's actually written by, if you're familiar with Rick Peterson.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Rick wrote the forward for me. But it's really about how to when you think about the book Moneyball, I mean, sorry, about the book movie Moneyball, right? Like what was Moneyball? It was basically a movement, right? Using data to sort of break away from outdated ways of thinking about how do you build successful teams.
Yep.
And similarly, what Moneyball Leadership is about, how to look at at a lot of these historically used, traditional, outdated leadership practices that no longer work around fear and control. And how for any leader to read and really think about, okay, if they're unhappy with where they are in their career right now and they're looking to, change the game, what are the steps they need to go through? How do they need to break away from these outdated patterns that are really just like costing them money, losing money, and how to really build a legacy in terms of how you're leading. So
Yeah.
that's what the book is all about, the similar concepts. And again, like leaders today, that was a big part of that was a big part of why I burn out, because it was, they weren't leading that was in a way that was helping us to win. It was making us average.
And the worst part is there's all this investment in you that is now being squandered because you're a burnt out resource, as opposed to
Mhm.
taking and positioning you in a way where there's longevity in growth, improvement, and longevity, as
Mhm.
opposed to burning out and now being the resources that went in being squandered for both you and the people that invested in you. So, yeah, no, I mean, there just seems to be so much of a better ROI
Yeah.
taking and getting this right. I want to get to a little segment here that we do here that's a little bit more lightning roundish. If
Okay.
and this is just for the folks that are listening to kind of get to know you a little bit.
Sure.
So, what would you say you're most proud of in business that you've accomplished?
Um, that's tough. Doing a TED talk.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
Most proud of in life that you've accomplished?
Uh, I have two great kids.
That's
Um,
always a good one to go with. Those,
yeah, and
yeah,
just
solid
yeah,
play. That way, if
two.
they ever listen, they're like, they see she likes us. You want that. You want that. Good stuff.
No, but like kids, I mean, they're a big reason why I do what I do. So, I want to help our future leaders. They're one day they're going to be in the workforce, and if I can make some sort of impact to create a better experience and environment for them someday, that's
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 a
the goal.
worthwhile thing. Yeah, no, it's a really good thing. It really
Yeah.
is. What one piece of advice would you give our listeners?
Don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't ask for advice.
Nice. That's a good one. I like that. One book you'd recommend, obviously, besides your book, Moneyball Leadership, right? Just throwing that back out there in case anybody
Yeah.
forgot.
Oh God, I've got so many. To sell is human.
Okay, to
To
sell
sell
us
is
human.
human. And the reason why is because I'm constantly, when I'm working with people, I'm like, you're all in sales. We're all in sales, and every conversation is a sales conversation. And what I like about that book by Daniel Pink is it really kind of breaks down like really we are, right. This is how we're showing up for ourselves, like, right, that personal accountability. So
Yep,
yeah, to
absolutely.
sell is human.
Good stuff. Love it. I breaking down every human interaction to some form of negotiation for a long time. When I finally got my head wrapped around that, it made it much more clear how important being persuasive really is, and even negotiating with myself and being persuasive and winning some of those negotiations at times.
Well, right. I always say is like the first and most important sales conversation is this one right here.
Absolutely, Josh. You're not allowed to have the Oreos. Yeah, but I mean, I did
Right.
extra cardio this. Yeah, like that whole conversation. It's a thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Favorite movie of all time?
Remember the Titans.
Good movie.
Yes.
Famous person in history you'd want to sit down with and meet if you could?
Oh, I don't know. Famous person in history. Maybe jeez. I don't know. Maybe Mandela?
Okay, nothing wrong with that. A person from your past you'd want to sit down with and have lunch with today if you could?
This is tough. A person from my past, alive or
Dealer's choice.
I think it probably my nana.
Okay.
Yeah,
See,
my grandmother.
these are fun questions, actually.
They are fun.
So not easy necessarily, but they are fun.
No, but it's more of like choosing, right?
Hmm.
Wait, which one would I say? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this also tells you a little bit like whose approval would really matter to you.
Yeah.
Like who you'd want to sit down with and get their assessment, their take on where you are. I
Yeah.
mean, for me, it would be my dad in a heartbeat. Love to sit down and hear what he has to say and weigh in. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like there is a, like I know that there's like a theme for me. It's all about how do you help people to see other people's perspectives and sort of other people's sides. Like how appropriate is that this week, right? Like how do you get people to sort of appreciate differences and understand how people see things from different perspectives,
sure.
right? We
The,
become so
the
fixated in our own way.
the peacemaker of the world as we wind up having to be in order to get people past their own stuff that they've bought into.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. It's and really like the critical thinking. Like that's to me is that's a piece is like how learn how to think, like really think, right?
yeah,
Um
for yourself, not
yeah,
borrow what somebody else did. That's
exactly.
where
That
we are right now. Is we want to outsource thinking. Somebody else thinks, takes and give me an idea, and I just take and regurgitate it. That is where most people are. It's frankly one of the big downsides of social media and the internet is the fact that we're letting absolute people that we would never listen to normally. Uncle Louie with the tinfoil hat just posted something, and now normal sane people are out there regurgitating it like it's factually true while thoroughly unvetted.
well, and the other thing about it too, I always say is like be careful like who you're listening to because people can make they can make a web fancy website or social, right? And they like on social media and they have no experience in what they're
Absolutely.
talking about. But
Oh,
because it looks fancy, right? They people get bought in and I'm like this person has no clue about what they're doing. And so make sure you vet your people before you're listening to them and what experience do they have in the thing that they're actually talking about.
absolutely. Um, what one piece of advice would you go back and give a younger version of you?
Don't don't put your limitations on what other people say about you,
All right.
right?
Don't
You just
don't believe their press releases.
don't believe what other people believe about you. Decide on who you are.
Okay. If you had to pick somebody to be stuck in a foxhole with, taking fire, who would you trust to have you back?
My husband.
Good, safe call. Also, nicely done. What do you do to unwind, Jamie?
Oh God. Um, I do the Peloton.
Ah,
Do the Peloton. I try to do yoga. Not I don't do as much. I really do a lot of I'm an Uber driver on the side because I'm driving my kids around all the time.
yeah.
I-
This is before they get a license. It's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I'm really like just running all the time when I'm not working.
Mm.
So I probably could have, there could probably be more fit in there, but for right now, as long as I can get my workout in a day, from a social life standpoint, it's like kind of minimal because between the work stuff, you're
Social. I've heard of
what?
social. I've heard of a social life. I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's like you can't do it all. It's just too much, and then trying to put your pressure on yourself to try to do it all, or whatever you see on people's social media feeds, which is all made up anyway.
So I'll tell you the one that they wrote me into that has been a huge find because of the way that my personal brain damage works is board games.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, like I remember who the person that got me in. They're like, I like board games. You mean like Monopoly? Like who the hell wants to play 4 hours of attrition only to find out what you knew an hour and a half into the game? I knew who was going to win. We're just going to wear somebody down the powder and crush them into bankruptcy. That's what this is. They're like, no, 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 no. There's much better ones. And so they got me roped in, hooked.
oh
And yeah, no, I mean, I have to say, I have a bit of a problem. I mean, I'm close to 1,000 different games that I own at this point.
really? Do you have
It
a
is
favorite?
like if you're not haven't gone down this road, I'll suggest two as just the kind of
Okay.
they're gateway games, and you can totally play them with the kids, and like you'll have a good time. One simpler of the two is a game called Ticket to Ride.
Hmm.
It's a very simple game. You can only do like three things on your turn. You do one of those three things. Simple. The second one is a game called Settlers of Catan. This is the one that got me. Because what's the problem with Monopoly? There's only two things to trade: money or property, and everybody wants both. So there's no way to have like a collaborative trade. But in
Yeah.
Settler of Catan, there's five different resources. There's wood, there's wheat, there's so five different things, right?
Yeah.
Well, I got wood, you need wood.
Yeah.
You got clay, I need clay. We can get a deal done, and like we're both happy.
Yeah.
And this is what's so much nicer, hour and a half ish playtime.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just a better experience, and yeah, a lot more fun.
That's we do a lot of card games. So when we go out as a family and every time there's guaranteed somebody comes and stops us because we don't do phones if we go to dinner.
Hmm.
There's no phones. And so
Good call.
we bring cards. So we typically play Phase 10 if you've played that before.
I know Phase 10.
Yeah, so either usually Phase 10 is what we do, either that or we do Uno. But what year we'll play Phase 10. I always have a thing of cards in my bag. So it just, it becomes the thing that we do. And but people are always like, are they serious? That's so cool. We should do that. Right? You hear like all these different things. It's so funny.
I grew up playing Pinochle with my family, so I mean, and 100%, it's a thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. I have a picture. I'll have to send it to you after. I have a picture of my son, his first Yankee game, and it was like a joke because we would, my husband and my son go to all the stadiums or like they're on their stadium tour. And his first Yankee game, it poured rain, and it was like this joke that every time he would go to a baseball game, it would rain. And so we have this picture of us sitting in like one of the stairwells playing cards, waiting for the rain to lay. With
It's
his
on.
like, it's my first Yankee game thing, right? Um, but
It's
yeah,
on.
anytime you can find a way to drop the phones and really get into something.
Connect as a human being. Absolutely. We're,
Absolutely,
we're desperate for it. As human
right?
beings, we desperately need it.
Absolutely.
So, last question I got for you, Jamie. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn.
That
That's
is the most concise answer I've ever got on that question. LinkedIn.
Oh, it's just, I mean, you type my name in LinkedIn, or you could type my name in on Google or whatever. But like LinkedIn is where I tend to, have my most of my presence. I mean, go to my website. But yeah, LinkedIn, send me a message. I'd love to connect.
Good stuff. Jamie, thank you so much for hanging out with us and for
Thank you.
sharing all that you did here. Really appreciate it. I know it's going to help our listeners.
Thank you. I had so
Uh,
much fun.
yeah, it was great. I want to thank our listeners for spending their time with us and getting to take the chance to meet Jamie. Reminding you guys always, as I love to do, there is never a good excuse not to know your shit. Till next time, guys.